Good day everyone, welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I will be doing a static pressure comparison between the two fans from Lian, which is actually the AL120 and the SL120. Now in this video, I will not test the noise nor the CFM, but just to show you the temperature on how well these two fans does on the radiator itself. Now on this build itself, I've actually made use of the AMD Ryzen 5 5600G that comes with an integrated graphic card. Then the RAMs, I will be using the Ballistic 32GB kit that runs on clock speed of 3200. The motherboard is in fact a ASRock Steel Legend B550M, and the cooler itself I actually make use of Arctic Liquid Freezer 2, the 240mm series, and the case itself is coming from Montech Air 100 Lite. If you guys are interested to know how I actually build up all this PC component into this case itself, right, I do have another video, so I'll just leave the URL at my top right hand corner. You can actually click on it and take a look about it. Before I start the test, just to let you know, for reference, if you can see on my table over here, this is actually 30 degrees Celsius in my room. This thermometer will always be here for your reference. Now let me take you to the BIOS itself. In the BIOS or UEFI, I've not done any overclocking. As you can see here, all are set to auto. I've actually only tweaked the XMP profile on my RAMs, which is running on 3200 RAM speed, and the Infinity Fabric, I've set it to 1600 consistently. Next, I've actually done the settings on all the case fans itself, and also the fans that is actually mounted on the radiator itself. For CPU fan 1, in fact, is my top fan, two of them, and chassis fan 1 is in fact the rear fan. And for chassis fan 4, right, this is the one that is actually mounted on the radiator itself. As I mentioned, CPU fan 1 is my top fan. I've actually set all the fan speed to a consistent of 60% all the way. So be it change from 60 degree to 100 degree, it will run at 60%. As for the rear fan, same thing, it's going to run at 60% throughout the test itself. As for the radiator fan, which is actually the chassis 4 fan over here. Now, I've actually done this test many times before I do this final thought about it. So when I run on PWM, and if I were to put at performance, right, for some reason the AL fan and the SL fan doesn't run on full speed. So having to say this, right, I would just set this to full speed, meaning to say all the fans that I've tested will be on full speed. And this is actually the Arctic. Let me just show you. See, this is actually the Arctic fan itself on the radiator. It's running on full speed. So it goes to same to the SL and the AL. The test method that I will conduct is pretty straightforward. I'll test out all the three fans, which is actually the Arctic, the AL, and the SL on my radiator, which shown over here. Right now, I'm actually testing the Arctic P12 PWM ARGB fans. And if you notice, right, on my right hand corner, you'll see a temperature reading. This is actually my room temperature, which is 29.5 degrees Celsius. Now, take you to the panel itself. The dashboard itself, I'll be using the Cinebench R23 to run the benchmark to toggle the CPU load to 100%. And it will show you over here the readings. This is actually from hardware info. It will show you the CPU temperature, the clock speed, the GPU temperature, and the motherboard temperature. And over here, right, as I mentioned, chassis 4 is my radiator fans, which is the Arctic right now. So this is actually at full speed, and it will always be at this full speed. Now, for CPU 1 and chassis 1, right, this is actually my top fan and my rear fan. As I mentioned, I've actually locked it to 60%, so it will always hover around 1290 or 1300 and above. So it always hover around there. And after, when I've done the 1 hour test, right, though it's actually 30 minutes every interval, so I will run 1 hour. Once I've actually done that, I will do a screenshot of the hardware info, because it tells me the maximum, the minimum, and the current, and of course the average. Alright, without further ado, let's start with the test. I'll start with the first test on the Arctic P12 PWM ARGB. Now, as you can see, the temperature is actually climbing right now, so I'll let it climb, and I'll be back later. Now, the first 30 minutes have passed, and I will continue to do the next 30 minutes. But before I do so, right, I've actually forgotten to mention that the first test will be having the mesh off, and the second 30 minutes, right, it will be on. So right now I'm going to place the mesh. With the mesh on right now, I'm going to run 30 minutes again. Now, by the end of the test, right, I will do a screenshot on the hardware info and to show you the results with the rest of the tests on the AL and the SL. So here we go again. Another 30 minutes have passed, so I'm just going to remove off the mesh itself. So these are the Arctic P12 fans. Just a rundown on the hardware info over here. So as you can see that the temperature over here, the max temperature, the minimum, and the current. And to scroll down, just to let you see. Now I'll be doing screenshot on this, then right after this, right, I will be swapping the fans from the Arctic, which is this, to the SL fans. I've done the swap from the P12 Arctic fans to this SL120 from Lian. Besides this, I have actually let the system idle for a while, and this is actually the stable temperature over here. And as you can see, the RPMs is actually at max. It was sometime over at 1800. In fact, these fans are rated at 1800, so I'll just let it be. And of course, this top fan and the rear fan, right, they will be consistent at 1300 more or less. Now I'll first start with the 30 minutes test without the mesh covering the front itself. So here we go. The first 30 minutes have passed. Right now I'm just going to place the mesh to the front. I'll continue on with the 30 minutes test again with the mesh in front. Here we go. Well, the next 30 minutes have actually done. I will take out the mesh. And as you can see, this is actually the SL fans. Now, looking on the hardware monitor here, or should I say hardware info, the temperature itself, have a look. These are the temperature, the max temperature and such. And now I'm going to switch to the AL fans. Here are the AL fans, which I've actually swapped from the SL fans. And of course, I'm going to test it without the mesh on for 30 minutes and with the mesh on for another 30 minutes. Looking on the dashboard itself, right, I let it sit on idle. This is actually the temperature, 33.4. And the max RPM on this AL fans are 1900. More or less. Let's begin with the test with the mesh off. Here we go. Now the first 30 minutes have passed and I will be placing the mesh in front. Now to do a test for the next 30 minutes. Here we go. Now all the tests have been completed. I will consolidate everything and to share with you with the results. And just to show you, this is in fact the mesh, and I'm taking it out. And inside is in fact the AL fans. And looking at the temperature, so these are the temperature over here. The results are out, and before I proceed, this is just a disclaimer. I've done this based on own experience and experimenting on the case and with this fans itself. So don't quote me as a professional on this. This is just my opinion. I'll start off with the SL and the AL specs. As you can see here, right, these are actually pulled from the official website from Lian. Both fans have a fan speed of 800 to 1900 RPM. The voltage to kickstart is minimum at 6 volt, and when it's running at full, right, it's 12 volt. The only difference about these two fans are the current drawn. For SL is running on a 0.18 ampere, and for AL, right, is drawing at 0.22. While I was conducting the test for all these fans itself, I just take note on the RPMs itself. Most of the time the SL fan is running at about 1700 to about 1800 RPMs, which is below 1900 RPM. I guess reason is because of the amperage usage, which is 0.18 ampere, or probably there are some obstruction of the blades being spin because it's actually drawing air and it hits the radiator. That's why it runs at this. On the AL itself, it's slightly different. It's able to actually drive and hold the RPMs within 1900 to 2000 RPM. Part of the reason is because of the amperage drawn, which is actually at 0.22A. It has more power to actually drive the motor to spin the blade. This is the reason why it's able to actually sustain the RPM throughout. You might be asking this question, if that's the case, the AL120 should perform much better compared to the SL120. The answer, yes, it does. Now on this diagram itself, right, it does show you, be it with the front mesh cover or without the front mesh cover in the case itself, the SL and the AL, you can see the difference. Without, on the SL fan itself, right, when the processor is running on 100%, it can hold the temperature up to 70.4 degrees Celsius. Else for the AL itself, right, it's 70 degrees Celsius, which is 0.4 degrees Celsius difference. And with the mesh itself, now with the mesh, the SL suffer quite a bit, which is not really that much. It's 0.5 degrees Celsius, and on the AL itself is 70.8, which is better than the SL fan itself. So you are right. Lian got this correct, as in like the fans itself is actually very good for the AL fans. I'll talk about the pros and cons, and I will answer to the question, if I'm only to choose within these two fans, which I will go for. The pros on the SL120 itself is well built, and it has a unique ARGB lighting effects, which is at the side. Now it uses less amperage compared to the AL120. The cons of this SL120 is slightly weaker compared to the AL120, and the rubber grommets, right, as I mentioned, as I noticed, all these rubber grommets over here, at times it will just wear and tear and it will just drop off. And there are lesser airflow through the blade itself. As mentioned earlier, there are some restriction based on the fact that it does not carry enough voltage, or should I say ampere. And another thing to take note, that the diameter of this fans on the SL itself is actually 110 millimeter. It's not 120. So that's where it lack off on the con side. As for the AL fan itself, the Pro, again, is well built. Now, this ARGB lighting effects, right, if you have a lot in your case, probably on 9, and if your case is actually white, all this light that is emitting on the blades itself, right, will bounce in your case. It's like super bright. It can be good, it can be bad. So it's all up to your personal preference. Now, it does have more airflow due to the fact that it draws more current that enable the motor to rotate stronger. And since it's actually of a bigger blade, I should say a standard 120mm blade, it draws more air with that much of a current. The con is using high amperage, 0.22. To me, it's still considered as high. And I did notice when I remove either of the fans off to change to another fan, when I touch the centerpiece itself, right, the AL120 runs hotter, as in like when I touch the surface over here, it's hotter compared to the SL120. Now, the question you would ask me is that, if only allowing me to choose both these fans, which one I will choose? My choice will still be the SL120 itself, as when I compare to these two fans, right, though the AL itself is well structured, as in like the airflow and such, for aesthetic wise, I will choose the SL120 due to the fact of the lightings itself. And for performance wise, right, based on 0.4 and 0.5 degrees difference, right, I will still choose the SL fans. Reason being is running at lower amperage. So that's my choice. There you have it. That's my preference of choosing either of this fan. I would choose the SL120 more than the AL120. Of course, you can actually choose either of these fans. You won't go wrong. Both are equally good, well built. It's just that the slight difference on the amperage and the current drawn. But both fans is able to hold on the 70 degree mark. Please note that the temperature that I've told you is based on this fans mounting on my Arctic Liquid Freezer 2, which has a 27mm thickness radiator. If you're using a 25mm thickness radiator, right, the result might be different. That's all I have for you for the AL and the SL fans coming from Lian itself. If you were to choose either one of them, as mentioned, you won't go wrong. for aesthetic wise or your own preference, it does work well. I'm going to talk off topic from the AL and the SL. If you guys just want to know about the AL and the SL, you can stop here. If you want to hear more, I'm just going to share with you the experience that I've done in this testing itself, which is not related to the SL or the AL. On this slide itself, right, I've actually put the actual fan that is mounted on the liquid freezer 2, which is actually the Arctic P12 PWM PST ARGB fans. It's a very long name, so I got a break. Now, aside from this, right, I did pull out my old P12 and to compare to this fan, the ARGB version. I would not tell you the results, maybe on the next video. Now, what's so impressive about this fan itself, right? As you can see, the temperature, 70.5 degrees Celsius, when my processor is actually running on full load, it can sustain at 70.5 as compared to the SL and the AL, which is 71.3 on the SL, 70.8 on the AL itself. So this is actually a very big difference. Not so much big difference on the AL fans itself. You might be saying, hey, look, the AL is actually holding on at 70.8. It's only 0.3 difference from the Arctic P12. Why don't you choose the AL? The answer is, look at the amperage. 0.11 on the Arctic P12 ARGB version, and the AL is running on 0.22. And if you were to look on my right, look at the RPMs itself. I'm running on 0.11 ampere, and it can run at the amperage, it can run on the RPM of 1900, sustaining it, and up to 2000 RPMs. As compared to AL itself, yes, it does almost the same, 1900 and above to 2000, but it draws lesser current. So that's the reason why I'm actually impressed with this fans itself. It can sustain at this high RPM, meaning to say there are obstruction between the fan blade drawing the air to the radiator itself, but it can sustain to this RPM using such low voltage. So that's the reason why I will choose the Arctic P12. Aside from testing this, getting impressed with this ARGB fans, next will be this case itself. I've actually done a review on this case. If you guys want to know how the functions and all, right, you can click on my top right hand corner. I'll just leave the URL over there. You can have a view. Now, what am I so impressed about this case itself, right? I have never experienced, or should I say, I did experience, but I have never really done a test on airflow. This is my very first time to put everything into actions. When I blow air through this mesh itself, right, I don't feel a single thing on my hand itself. So this is something which is actually very weird. When I plug all these fans in, right, it is able to actually draw fan through this hose itself and to sustain the air and the static pressure to the radiator itself and providing good results. So I'm actually very impressed. If you guys are into MATX case itself, right, probably you should give this a try. I know there are other brands like Corsair, from Factory Design, etc. Those are premium cases. True enough, they do function, they do feel good, do feel premium, but the price tag is there. It's expensive. Else for this, right, I spent less than 40, I think it's $46 USD. Singapore dollars is actually $56. So it's so much cheaper, but yet it functions. Be it the tempered glass, be it the front mesh, be it the top, be it the mounting, etc. So you can actually consider about this. Alright then, that's all I have for you today. And for those of you who actually enjoyed, or should I say new to this channel, welcome to my channel. If you like my content, do remember to subscribe and to click on the notification bell button. Till then, again, all the best in your build and all your future findings about the PC components. Take care, goodbye, see ya.